Let me propose a question to you fairly quickly. What happened to Kira after Diamond is Unbreakable? Now, I think a lot of you will end up, answering this really fast. Well, Metas, he died, of course. This is a very stupid question. And to be fair, you would be correct. However, unlike previous JoJo villains who have been subjected to eternal punishment after their crimes or just straight up died afterwards, Kira is actually a very interesting case. What if I told you that Kira is actually still around and is not a serial killer? He's actually, in fact, kind of something similar to Ghost Rider. If I've piqued your interest, hello, my name is Metas. Walk with me here. Now, I'm not talking about some fan-made thing or something I've come up with, but something that Araki himself has tried to answer. The question here, what happened to Kira after Diamond is Unbreakable, is something that even Araki wondered about and has made a short story about, that frankly, to my surprise, not a lot of JoJo fans know about. The story in question's name being Dead Man's Questions. Now, before I dive headfirst into the deep end with this video, I do want to provide a little bit of context of what this video is going to truly be about. First off, it is to answer the original question at the very beginning of this video. Second, kind of an analysis, and third, a review, as I don't think I'll ever properly talk about this story ever again due to the circumstances of this type of story. So I would like to do it all in one go. And where I think we should begin is with the backstory and the history of Kira, as it's pretty integral for the plot of Dead Man's Questions in the long run, and elevates the story to even a higher degree than if you were to read it without knowing any of this information. Trust me, once you get to the ending of this story and knowing the entire context of Kira's character, you will be wanting more, just like I have. Now, shockingly enough, Kira does have a backstory. While never shown in the manga or anime, he definitely does have one, as it's stated by Araki in two separate interviews, one being fairly short and the other one being very long. Kira in his earlier years was a boy with two older parents, significantly older than the average parent. His mother would abusively coddle him, while his father would turn a blind eye to this abuse. During this overprotectiveness / underprotectiveness, Kira would find his fetish for hands. Whether or not it's because of the abuse or something after that is yet to be determined. But with a weird fetish and a even weirder backstory, what could possibly go wrong? He murdered 46 women prior to the events of Diamond is Unbreakable. Most of these women were murdered without Killer Queen, by the way, too. So yeah, and their bodies weren't found on top of that, just to dig in the knife just a bit deeper. To be honest, in my opinion, this is totally expected. Yeah, no fucking wonder he had problems, dude. He had no concept of social interaction / how to actually be a proper person or a proper dude because of his over coddling mother. I didn't know what coddling meant before the recording of this video, and the fact that I do now know means that in context to this entire story means that his mom probably didn't let him do anything. However, she probably also didn't correct his misbehavior. And with that bad foundational base with his mom and dad, it totally makes sense why he ended up becoming a serial killer. What then makes it worse is Kira's dad was linked to Dio, and for whatever reason, Kira's dad had a stand arrow with him, and Kira would eventually find this stand arrow years later while being a serial killer, leading to the birth of Killer Queen, a stand that would help cover up all of his murders thanks to its bombs. Many thought these girls went missing when in fact Killer Queen had actually iced them to oblivion. Morio now has a silent homicidal maniac stand user, leaving no evidence behind, and for a very long time would go unseen. However, we can't change this sad backstory, as Kira developed into a monster, and now we just have to deal with the repercussions of that monster. In the ending of Diamond is Unbreakable, Kira is found out due to his pride that he's gained with Killer Queen. Shockingly, the greatest thing he ever gained was his biggest disadvantage. He did really good for a serial killer in retrospect, but after gaining this massive power up, it really was the downfall for the guy. He thought himself unstoppable. However, thanks to the Morio warriors and Hayato, he was finally put down for good. Kira could be described as a luck god, somehow managing to find his way out of everything until now, as in some type of karmic retribution or some form of calamity, he would die in a hilarious fashion, that being by ambulance. And after his physical body had died, he was sent to the other world by Ghost Girl Allie at the paws of Arnold, Remy's dog, his first murder victim. In my own words, a perfect ending to a cruel, evil monster who should never see the light of day again. So why is he back then? Well, he kind of is, kind of isn't. It's weird depending on how you want to see how you think people work, as if it's like if they lose all their memories, are they actually the same person? And should you judge them on those previous actions if they don't remember them at all and act like a completely different person because they have no previous memory? But for right now, I will recap Deadman's questions. Very briefly, I will omit some details just to make it a lot more fun for you guys so you can read it after this video. So Deadman's question starts off with Kira interacting with the world while nothing is reacting to him. During all of this, he is currently gathering up objects like it was a video game or something, all for the purposes of getting into some girl's house. Not starting off on a good foot here, I'm not gonna lie. However, it is revealed that he's just trying to get in for a secret reason. Once the girl allows him to get into the house, he disappears, as he was trying to fake being a mailman of sorts, and gets in. However, she can't see him, and this is for a very good reason. It is now revealed to the audience that Kira, or the man who will be eventually named Kira, is actually just a spirit, a ghost, actually is the more proper term here. And the reason why he's acting so weirder than usual is the fact that ghosts have to follow a specific set of rules laid out by the universe itself. His objective here in this household? To kill the man that lives with this woman. We then get some information about how ghosts interact with the people of the living world and how there's a lot of abstract rules that these ghosts and spirits need to follow. If they don't, there could be severe consequences to their health? I don't know if that's the correct term I should be using for these guys. I think? Question mark? As we see later on in the story, Kira can still be hurt with his spiritual body by animals and other things. So it's important for him to stay anonymous / completely unaware for regular people. I honestly find this as pretty cool world building for the JoJo's universe, as it's like this double-edged sword, but like not in a negative connotation, to where it kind of answers the question of how Araki thinks spirits work in general within the supernatural world of JoJo's, because it's like ghosts just don't want to be seen because they will and can be hurt by regular people. That would also go for real life, as Araki is always trying to answer the supernatural within his manga. So it's actually pretty cool here if you actually know the history of the author and his thoughts about, well, the real world and the wacky stuff that takes place here. And while we don't get a lot more information about how spirits work, kind of after this point, at least in a more in-depth kind of way, Kira starts to ask a lot of questions that kind of seem very Araki inspired. Yeah, it's totally not like the entire manga is built around that, like, at all. And he does it constantly throughout this entire manga, and the questions get crazier and crazier throughout the entire thing. Totally not. To get back on track with the story recap, Kira fails at getting into the man's room because of the dog and the woman that also live there. So he has to take a different approach because he has to gain permission from the person inside the room to be present there. It is then revealed the man hiding within this room is actually a serial killer, we'll just leave it at that, who is about to pass a deadline which he cannot be convicted for his crime anymore. He, in a pride-filled state, invites anybody or anything into his room, giving Kira the ability to walk in there, and as he does, Kira finishes him off in a single blow. It is then revealed to the audience that this is actually Yoshikage Kira committing these acts of vengeance on evildoers. Why Kira is doing these jobs now is because it's the only thing that gives him happiness in the afterlife, as he does not remember his previous life at all and constantly questions it. The job here in specific was on the condition of killing this murderer at his happiest moment, that being the deadline before he can be convicted of murder. He is a literal spirit of vengeance. It's probably not supposed to be taken that way, but it's definitely how I'm feeling about it. He is a literal ghost getting justice and or revenge for somebody living in the living world. Even if it's not supposed to be like a spirit of vengeance or Ghost Rider thing, the sheer fact that Kira, a serial killer in a previous life, is now out there dealing justice in the afterlife is honestly pretty cool, at least in terms of concept, and I would actually say execution here as well. In the following chapter, after securing a seat to where nobody would interact with him, Kira starts dropping some of the most complex questions any human can ponder. He kinda gives them an answer, but it's more like, I have a solution to it, but this isn't concrete. And if I did find an answer to it, it would basically solve my problems. I will talk about this questioning later in the video because I want to elaborate a lot on it, but we'll save it for later. Continuing forward, the reason why Kira has gained a seat on the train as he's going on a different job, thanks to his boss, a female monk priest, who has ordered him to go to the ghost mansion. While this is a job which is fulfilling his purpose in life now, the ghost mansion piques his curiosity a lot, as Kira does want a home within the real life world where a ghost can just be there without the problems of people and animals bothering him. And when Kira finds this ghost mansion, it is away from human eyes. It's everything he wants it to be. Hidden, it's stocked with everything he could ever want, music, gun replicas, etc. He loves the place overall. I won't go too in depth with everything he finds, but it's honestly perfect for Kira. So you're probably wondering though, what's the catch, metas? Because it is a JoJo story. And well, the catch is eggs? Question mark? You see, Kira finds these eggs and has this whole like, are they inanimate objects? Are they real? What's going on here? He has this whole philosophical debate of which comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing, but in like ghost terms. And then sometime after that, he eventually finds out that some of them are moving. Creatures or organisms that exist in the real world to clean up spirits so they don't overflow the real world so they can move on into the spirit realm. Now, these little things cause Kira some trouble, to the point where Kira has to remove his own arm so they don't kill him. So Kira does take some drastic measures to protect himself. Over the course of the fight, he kind of speculates that this ghost mansion is a nest for these spirit cleaners, and eventually does find a gun within the ghost mansion to defend himself a bit more, and does get out of the place with some heavy damage, I guess. I don't really know how spirits heal themselves. Maybe they can't, depending on how the depictions from earlier suggest. So Kira might have actually lost an arm because of this encounter, and his actions following kind of do make sense just a bit. As chapter 3 closes, it kind of suggests the fact that Kira is going to go interrogate the female monk under suspicion that she was lying to him, as she was probably trying to get him killed, is what Kira is thinking here. And if she was, Kira is going to finish her off and take her left arm for his own. And that concludes the recap. Overall, I love the story. While I did omit some details within this recap, I very heavily urge you to read this on your own. It is honestly one of my favorite Araki stories ever, not including the original main series. And that's due to the fact that this story asks a lot of questions that makes the viewer, me in specific, think heavily. And somebody who is so engrossed into the JoJo mythos, it gets me pondering a lot. And on top of that, we get this amazing past character, get more screen time to see what happened after the events of his debut part. It's overall fantastic. I highly recommend it for JoJo fans a lot. Please do go read this. It will be down in the description below. Story aside, let's talk about Yoshikage Kira here. By far, the most intriguing thing about this entire story is Kira himself. Why though, you might ask? Well, in my personal opinion, I think it's because he is Yoshikage Kira, but doesn't know what that initially means, or means in general, I should say. The reason why I covered the entire initial backstory for Kira, even the side content that was stated in the interviews, was because of this. Kira lived such a happy life for himself, but now is relegated to this ghost of vengeance, trying to do these jobs to find happiness again. When in retrospect, he already had that ultimate happiness for some time, like somebody else we saw in this manga, but now is trying to find it again because, well, he has nothing to rely on previously, kind of making him a whole new being entirely. It's almost like we have a fourth version of Yoshikage Kira now, who doesn't know what Yoshikage Kira was. And because of that, he's entirely a brand new character who has the potential of seeing his previous life, and the reaction from that could be ultimately awesome. But sadly, we don't know if that ever does happen because, of course, this is a short story. But the fact that you think it's going to happen is what really grips me personally, and I think will probably grip a lot of you. And with Deadman's questions ending off on a cliffhanger like that, it puts me in a pretty meta spot, pun intended, to where I want to see more. I want to see if Kira figures out who he is or what the afterlife is in general. The questions I came up with while reading it, intended by Araki or not, is what drove me into loving the story so much. Which leads me into this segue if you know your grander JoJo lore. Kira says that he is trying to find happiness with this new job, even if it still exists after killing the female monk priest, and that he knows subconsciously that he will never go to heaven. Made me ask this question to myself: is Deadman's questions, the questioning in general about life, Kira's own personal hell? Because he'll never find these answers ever, as there is not one solution to any of his problems or questions here in this story. Is that now his fated life in the afterlife? My jaw was on the floor once I came to that conclusion. conclusion, and I was glazing Araki. I had thought I'd reached Nirvana. I still think I've reached Nirvana after coming to this conclusion. I love this story so much. It's totally not because I have a whole bunch of caffeine running through my system, but that's not the point. This story is awesome. I love these meta questions that I'm asking to myself and in general. And the fact that I feel like Kira, and the fact that I'll never get an answer to any of these questions because Araki will not elaborate on them any further, which is honestly technically genius, but as a viewer, I want to know, damn it. Like, the biggest one personally for me that Kira asks is, if there is a spirit world, how do babies come into existence? Do they kind of like split off from their mother's soul, or do they like get a new one from the spirit world? And this kind of questioning coming from a literal spirit himself who doesn't have the answer to that is mind-boggling, because you would expect him to know a lot about spirits, as he is a spirit living in the real world, not in the spirit world. So I would expect him to have more spirit knowledge than the average human, but even then, he doesn't know. And the answer we get, depending on that question, depending how layered it is with baby stuff and, you know, the spirit world stuff, it could have some pretty dire consequences depending on how you think it works and how we see characters die in this franchise. It's sad, but honestly pretty cool. I would love to see more of this Kira, analyze him a bit more, to see the world a bit more. I am locked in. I am fully engaged. This story has me by the balls. Let me speak more about the world here. So for a very long time, when it came to me and JoJo world building, I have always loved it and I've always wanted to know more about it. And there is a lot to be discovered here if you are looking for it. JoJo's has always been a series about the supernatural, and while the main series kind of covers it so often, I will give the Spokeron Kishibe kind of its credit. It does explore a bit of that world a bit more. We have demons, we have spirits, we have interesting organisms that the normal man can't see, stand shenanigans, deities that may or may not be demons, question mark on that one. It's honestly pretty cool. In Dead Man's Questions, it basically confirms that there is a supernatural undertone taking place at all times within the universe, no matter what. And if you think about it for too long, it genuinely, in my case, changes how you see the JoJo universe in its entirety. I am cursed with knowledge I should not have. What I mean by that, and stay with me here, what if all the characters we've ever seen die on screen may or may not have passed into the afterlife or the spirit realm? They're just roaming around on Earth as a ghost. Anybody, your fan favorite character who might have died, is just there. Here's one that will freak people out. What if Kakyoin's just roaming Egypt as a ghost? Or maybe Iggy or Avdol? Anybody in part 5? Oh my god, I feel so bad for Naranja, dude. Oh, poor baby. It kind of messes you up if you think about it for too long, honestly. Doom enjoying aside, from a world building perspective, I love it a lot. It adds a lot more to the universe, and you have to constantly think about the actions that are taking place on screen within the main story. I would personally love if we got more side stories with the ghost of characters we've seen in the main franchise, kind of get a little spin-off story or something. I think it would be honestly pretty cool to see what they're thinking from the other side. Also, ghost fights. That's just a cool concept in general. I would love to see how Kira, or really any character as a ghost, would fight. I don't know. That's just a random thing I thought I'd mention here. And it doesn't even have to be Araki. I would love if, I can't pronounce his name because I'm terrible with Japanese, but like Kanado, the guy who helped make Crazy Diamond's Demonic Heartbreak, write like a Kira story, like a continuation to Dead Man's Questions, or just an entirely new ghost story in general, would be honestly a treat I would enjoy. However, it could also possibly ruin the whole aspect of the story in general if it were to be elaborated on, so you do have to be careful with it. But it's a weird gray area, and I'm kind of leaning towards more elaboration, but that's just the fan I personally am, so just keep that in mind. Overall, fantastic story, fantastic world building, fantastic questions that the author provides that I want answers to, and the questions I said to myself that I want answers to. It's overall a phenomenal story that I wish got more. Honestly amazing. Go read it for yourself. I really highly recommend it. Well, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated. I'll see you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen.